Hi, this is Terry McEwen. I wanted to update you today on the 2012-13 school year's test security and ethics. This will be your required training for test security and testing ethics for the upcoming state assessment season. Remember that test security and ethics training is required annually for all principals, teachers, and paraeducators. The training must include the test security component, the ethics, and also how to provide a read aloud accommodation. The read aloud accommodation training will be actually provided in a separate PowerPoint presentation. There are some procedures to be aware of in 2012-13. We will be providing you written procedures for the distribution and return of materials. We've always required that everything be returned to us, but we now have to make sure that that is in writing, so you will be receiving that. All test tickets that you distribute to students must be recollected and then shredded upon the completion of testing. We will also be providing, as part of this training today, specific procedures for test reactivation, but I will also be providing that in writing to all principals. Test reactivations under new federal guidelines must be kept to a minimum and must be documented. Make sure at the building level that you do follow all the procedures for distribution and return of materials. Make sure that you are following all of the procedures for test reactivation, and make sure that you do keep a reactivation log. Teachers and other proctors, make sure that you are actively monitoring your testing environment. This is best done by moving around the room and looking over students' shoulders, making sure that they're actively engaged in taking the test. You also might want to create a procedure in your classroom or in your testing room where students either give you a signal or raise their hand when they are at that end review screen. It is really important that you get a chance to review that screen before they close out of the test, because once that's done, there's no going back. So it's best to know that whether they've answered all the questions at that point. Make sure also that no teachers are actually driving the mouse. The student only can drive the mouse, not the teacher. There were several instances during monitoring visits last year where it was discovered that teachers were actually manipulating the computer mouse rather than the student, and this would be a suspect process. New regulations regarding reactivation. Only building administrators, myself or Michelle Hunter, my administrative assistant, can reactivate tests. Teachers may not reactivate tests. This has been now spelled out in very clear federal guidelines. Best practice is always to have 2 people present when reactivating a test, but again, teachers may not be the reactivators of a test. If there's a need to reactivate a test session for a student, please contact me or the building principal. There must be then a log kept on file regarding the reason for the reactivation, who was reactivated, the date of the reactivation, etc. Tests can only be reactivated when certain conditions exist, and these are listed on the slide. But it is really important to note how limited this list is. Reactivation is not just a standard procedure when we feel like it. It is subject to pretty stringent guidelines. This is a version of a sample reactivation log. You can certainly borrow this particular sample and use it for yourself. Modify it in any way you would like, but it needs to contain the essential information that you see here. The date, the time, what subject was being tested, what test part we were on, the name of the student ID, the grade, and most important, what was the reason for reactivation. Some reasons we cannot reactivate. And this is really important for you to focus on because we've had requests to reactivate for any and all of these reasons. We cannot reactivate if you believe a student should have scored differently. That is unfortunate, but we can try to prevent that by active proctoring. We can't correct it by having a student reactivated and logging back in to the test. We also cannot reactivate when a student has completed all 3 of the test parts. We cannot reactivate when poor proctoring practices permitted a student to leave questions unanswered. And we cannot reactivate post facto when we have allowed a student to complete a test when that student is distracted, ill, misbehaving, or otherwise off task. Again, these are all actual situations that have occurred that we've had requests for reactivation, and federal and state guidelines are now very clear and specific about these particular events, and we cannot reactivate for any of these reasons. This is a new procedure that you're seeing on the screen right now. Should you need to reactivate and reopen a test session for any reason. So for example, the student shut down the test without checking with an adult and staff wants to make sure the student actually completed the session. So if you're logging back into a test with a student ticket, the student must be present when that test session is reopened. An adult may not go in with a student ticket and log into any test for any reason at any time. This is a violation of test security and is, in fact, an offense that could result in disciplinary action. So here's an ethics question for you. You've completed the state testing in reading. Upon review of your results, you notice that one of your students scored a 24%. What should you do? Discuss this with your neighbors. Take 30 seconds. Go. Okay, if I could get you all to come back together again, let's find out how your answers compared to the actual ethics results. So what should you do if you discover that a student did not score as expected? Unfortunately, there is nothing you can do at this point. This is one of those times where reactivation is impossible under state and federal guidelines. How can you prevent this situation from occurring? Again, active proctoring is important, giving students that pre-test pep talk, and making sure that we look at that end review screen at the conclusion of every test part. Any request for reactivation after all 3 parts of a test are completed must be approved and submitted by only the district assessment director, which is me. So the only reason for this would be a test part with unanswered questions. This has to be submitted to the State Department for approval. It can only be submitted by me, and then I have to wait for them to approve that request, get back to me with their answer, and then if it is approved, then we would be allowed to re-enter that test. Otherwise, it is not possible to re-enter a test once it is completed. Once you've reviewed student assessment results, you cannot reactivate a student test part, and you cannot reactivate again for students whose results you deem are not appropriate. So again, this is a review. Reactivation after test completion, only if the test shows missing answers, must be submitted to me, and cannot be requested by teachers or principals directly to CETE or KSDE. Remember, teachers may not contact the State Department or the Center for Ed Testing and Evaluation. You must work through the USD 497 Assessment Office. Neither the CETE nor KSDE will respond to you. They will only respond to me during the testing season. Please follow this protocol because it will save you lots of time and frustration if you're trying to call them directly. What do you do in the case when you're providing a read-aloud accommodation and the reader of the test discovers that there's an error in one of the test questions? Generally, when a script item differs from the KCA item, in other words, the item that's actually on the test itself, read the item from the screen of the printed test, even if it differs from what the script says. Then please let me know that there was a script issue. Don't forward the item stem, or anything else from that item via email because that's a violation of test security. But it would be helpful for me to know kind of what the general issue was. And you see some examples of what those issues might be on the screen in front of you right now. So please make sure that you read the item exactly as it appears on the computer screen, or if it's a paper test that the student is encountering, make sure that you read it exactly as it is on their test. Don't follow the script at that point. A few other items to keep in mind as we navigate through this 2012-13 state assessment season. Don't direct students to an answer. Don't answer questions in a way that lead students to an answer. You may not collect or score show your work kinds of paper. Don't provide any kind of grade for the state assessments. Do not read any part of a reading passage to a student. Don't paraphrase questions or answer choices to a student. And you may not require students to show their work. However, it is always good to have showing their work in place as a standard process and procedure of the way that you always do business, and then that way state assessments are just another example of how we do business in our school every day. Finally, do read the directions to students and do repeat them, paraphrase them, translate them, whatever other means are necessary to make sure that each and every student knows exactly what to do on every test part. Do provide scratch paper and or manipulatives. Do allow students to read items aloud to self. This is a great strategy, and it slows some of our quick clickers down, and it makes sure that they are actually processing the information. Do encourage students to make sure they answer every question. There is a sad day come when a student only answered 10 of 25 questions and is scoring academic warning, and it's only because they skipped questions. Do check that review end screen, and do read and review the assessment do's and don'ts on the Assessment Information Conference on First Class. I have updated that for 2013, and do thank Joni Appleman for her work on creating this easy two-sided two-column piece to give us those do's and don'ts.